when we lose a loved one, that can be a powerful reminder of the ultimate aim and purpose of our Dhamma practice, which is reaching the deathless. There are numerous benefits in Dhamma practice, simply in everyday life, to improve our life. If we make good karma, we are gaining a very wholesome form of happiness. It makes us happy and makes the mind bright and happy here and now, simply by the act of kindness, of sharing, of giving. When we keep precepts, it means that we can experience freedom from remorse. We have a clear conscience. We experience what is called the blameless happiness. And again, that is something which is not that difficult to achieve, but by keeping the 5 precepts, we will receive that benefit. The other teachings of the Buddha, like practicing loving kindness, unconditional loving kindness to all beings, to develop empathy and compassion, and to have respect to those who deserve respect, and to look after parents, to practice gratitude, to develop contentment with what we have. Now, these are all things which are relatively easy, accessible, and which will make our life much more enjoyable, much more beneficial for other people, much more meaningful, and which will give us wholesome happiness. But the Buddha Dhamma is very deep, it's profound. And it goes beyond all these benefits we can receive in improving our life in this human body, in this human world. It even goes beyond attaining a fortunate rebirth. Even in the human world, if we improve our life, the human world has severe limitations. But if we are, say, reborn in Devaloka due to keeping precepts, due to making good karma, we can live what would count as millions of years in human reckoning, without war, without sickness, a kind of paradise state. But that is still also impermanent. And when we lose a loved one, that is a powerful reminder now what we are ultimately practicing for. And that is what the Buddha called the amata dhatu, the deathless element, which is a synonym, another epithet for the goal of the practice. Often the Buddha would call it Nibbāna. You can call it the end of suffering, the end of the round of rebirth. You can also call it freedom, liberation, release. But you can also call it the deathless. Because it is possible, by following the Buddha's teaching, that we can reach a state, a realization, an experience which brings us beyond death and rebirth. It means if we practice the Dhamma to the full extent, like so many of the great disciples of the Buddha did, and we develop wisdom and insight deep enough that we can fully abandon all attachment, all craving, all anger, hatred and delusion, all ignorance, that we experience, even in this life, what is beyond death, the deathless. It is possible to reach a state where you will never again feel that pain of losing someone who's so close to you. It's usually one of the worst pains a person can experience, and some or many people would rather be tortured or experience intense physical pain than enduring the loss of someone who's really close to them because it's so painful. But the message of the Buddha is that it is possible to go beyond that. And it is one of the imperturbabilities, unshakabilities of the Tathagata, that when anyone practices his teaching exactly the way the Buddha has taught it, that they will experience that. We have a guarantee of the Buddha. If we practice exactly as he has taught, we will actually experience that state. It may take time, but in the end we will experience it. So when we experience this pain of losing someone who is so close to us, the best thing we can do is turning that around and using it as a motivation for our Dhamma practice. After all, we know the story of the Bodhisattva. Do you all know that story of the Bodhisattva, the 4 outings? They say that the father, the king, because of the prediction that the Buddha would either become a returning emperor who will rule the whole world without violence, and blessed by his powerful parami, good karma, and personality, he would be able to rule without resorting to war and violence and the whole world. But if he would renounce the household life and would become an ascetic, the prediction was that he would become a Buddha, discover the deathless and share that with countless beings. Now the Buddha's father, being a proud Khattiya king of the Sakyan clan, he wasn't interested in his son becoming a Buddha or an ascetic. He wanted him to become the most powerful king ever. And they say that in order to prevent him from renouncing lay life, he confined him in the pleasure palaces. He had 3 palaces for the 3 seasons. A nice, comfy, warm one for the cold season. A cool one a little bit in the mountains for the hot season. And then a very indulgent one for the rainy season. He wouldn't go out in all the rains and just enjoy sensual pleasures. And he would try to keep all suffering hidden from him. They say that no old people would be ever allowed in there. And if one of the beautiful young dancing girls attending on him got sick or anything, she would be skillfully shuffled out till she is healthy again. And they would remove even the flowers, they say, before they withered. That was all a strategy to keep the Buddha in the household life. However, one day the Bodhisattva said to his father, if I'm supposed to rule this empire one day, I should know it somehow. I want to go and see the kingdom. And then the father arranged an outing for him and was meant to go to the pleasure grove somewhere and again having a good time. And his charioteer Chandan was driving him out. But what happened on the way? He saw an old person. And in our society, we're hiding them, old people, we put into the nursing home. But they're not so visible. And then you visit them maybe once a year for Christmas. I'm being cynical here, but this is a bit what's happening, that they're hidden. And the Bodhisattva asked his charioteer, what is that? And then his charioteer Chanda explained that is an old person, broken teeth, bent over, wrinkled skin, drooping eyes and drooping lips and saliva coming out and being ugly and decayed. And then the Bodhisattva asked, is it only this person who is getting old or will be like this? And then Chanda explained to him that the same thing will happen to him. The same thing will happen to his most beautiful model wife. the most beautiful girl in the country, Princess Bimba Devi Yasodhara. And then the Bodhisattva said enough of the pleasure grove, and he went back home. And he was sitting and contemplating and thinking about that. And after he had somewhat recovered from that, the second outing happened. And what did he bump into this time? Oh, it's sick, exactly. Someone gravely ill, vomiting, high fever, moaning, groaning. And very similar. And then the third outing, what happened at the third outing? The dead body, funeral procession. And I saw the dead body. And again he asked the charioteer, Channa, what is that? And Channa explained that is a dead person, a dead body, with a mind departed, with consciousness gone, and moving on to the next life. And again, very smart because of his wisdom faculty, the Bodhisattva asked him, is it only this person? And the charioteer explained, no, everyone. The one day that will happen to your body as well. Will happen to the body of your father, your mother, your brother, and also your beautiful wife. And he went back home again, contemplating. And the fourth outing, he saw the samana, the ascetic, the monk. And he noticed that he looked more peaceful than other people, more calm, more composed, more mindful, more restrained, and more at ease. And that ultimately inspired him to do the same thing. And the way this story is usually presented, it sounds a little bit, it sounds a bit naive. It's not naive at all, because there's a deep archetypal meaning in that. Because we all tend to live in the pleasure palace. There's a little King Suddhodana in our mind, and we are trying to hide the realities of life from us, just like King Suddhodana tried to hide the realities of life from his son. That's the same what our whole society is doing. As I mentioned, old people in nursing home, sick people, hospital, or maybe in a hospice, dead bodies, off to the undertaker. And if you ever do exhibit them, in Germany they virtually never do that, but in Australia I see it. In Germany it's usually completely hidden. At the funeral you only have the closed coffin. But if they do exhibit it, what do you do beforehand? You get the embalmer to make them look as not dead and lifelike as possible. Even with the best embalmer, that is obviously limited, but they try their best. You have only the face and nicely, maybe even makeup and so on, and then beautifully dressed. Now this is how society is hiding that. And you may not be a prince or a princess. Do you have a charioteer and a chariot? Do you have a kingdom, and do you go to the pleasure grove? You may go to the valley and to the clubs, and you may go on a cruise. Now that is the equivalent. You go on a nice holiday to Paris, you go into a nice restaurant, you go into a nice party, and so on. This is the same thing. And just like King Suddhodana tried to engage his son, the Bodhisattva, in an endless array of sensual distractions, and we are doing usually the same. We try to do the same. And even if you don't have a chariot, have you ever bumped into an old person? Have you ever encountered an old person? Most likely, yes. In my case, I only have to look into the mirror by now. I see an old person in the mirror. But the question is, did we have that same superior wisdom faculty as a bodhisattva, that we actually ask the question, what is that? It's not a naive question at all, it's actually a very profound and deep question. And the bodhisattva asked it because he has got that strong wisdom faculty and he had the strength to face that question. And the charioteer, apart from the literal meaning, the charioteer is also a simile for mindfulness and wisdom. In some suttas, the Buddha uses that as a simile for mindfulness and wisdom. Because hopefully when you go through your life, hopefully you have the charioteer being mindfulness and wisdom to guide you around. So you can interpret that in a more metaphorical meaning as a bodhisattva engaging with his mindfulness and wisdom faculty and contemplating and asking first the question of what is that actually, and not just pushing it away and hiding it. Put some makeup, use a filter when you put the photo. And then secondly, another very important question, is it only this person? And again, it sounds naive. If someone really asked us, we would all admit, in old age, it's not only other people, I will also become old. But even if we say so, deeper down, we feel and act as if it's not the case. Old age is somewhere in the future. And I notice now, old age becomes older, the older you get. And if you're 20, 50 is really old. But once you start approaching 50, then 50 isn't really old, 60, 70 is old. I haven't been at 60, 70 yet, but I guess once you're 70, then you think 90 is really old. And once you're 90, you may not be thinking much because you may be dead anyhow. But you know what I mean, how we are pushing that ahead. And it's the same with the other two, the sickness. It's quite amazing now, although there's so much sickness all around. Usually we live our life assuming, I'm not the person getting pancreatic cancer or lung cancer or this or that. Again, theoretically we will acknowledge it, but deeper down we live in this, what the Buddha called mother intoxication of health. It's a kind of deluded, intoxicated state that I will not end up like this, or only somewhere in the distant future, not now. I don't assume that I have a stroke or a heart attack before the afternoon session here. But how do I know that? So I trust that all of you have encountered the old person, the sick person, and the dead body. Maybe additionally also a newborn child. We've got another Devaduta, and you have a monk sitting in front of you. And so you have got all the signs. But do you ask the questions? And if someone close to you is taken away from you, then this is an excellent opportunity to really face these questions. And compared to the Bodhisattva, we have a huge advantage. Because the Bodhisattva didn't have a clear answer how to get beyond that. When he left the household life, and he did that on intuition, based on his very strong parami, and a conviction that it is possible to find the deathless somehow. That was obviously a very difficult thing to do, whereas we already have the Buddha, and he has already realized it, and the countless others in the last 2,500 years have realized it, and shared that, and talked about that, and encouraged us to do the same. So what we ideally do is turning that unwholesome pain that makes us depressed and melancholic and unable to cope, we turn that around into what the Buddha called Samvega. And Samvega is a wholesome emotion, but it's painful. There's a sense of urgency that one gains from contemplating the impermanence, from facing these questions the Bodhisattva asked. And the Buddha considered that an interesting feeling because it is unpleasant, but at the same time it's actually wholesome and helpful because it will propel us to actually practice the Dhamma. It reminds us what this is really all about. And it is not only about living the life more skillful, more happily, more beneficially, more meaningfully, and to have a good rebirth, but the ultimate aim is to go even beyond death and rebirth completely, to realize a state where no suffering can be experienced anymore. And Samvega helps us in doing that. Samvega gets us out of the pleasure palace. It's easy to happen, particularly if we are still not that old, not that sick, in a country like Australia, and maybe you're reasonably wealthy, have a good job, nice home. It's easy to get caught by the intoxications of youth, of life, and of health. It's the opposite of what the Bodhisattva did. Now they subconsciously acting and living as if I'm never going to die, I'm never going to get really sick, I'm never going to be really old. Intellectually we wouldn't say that, but deep down it's kind of how we live and feel. And Samvega helps us to get out of that. Samvega clears out that intoxication. And just like getting sober when you got sloshed, it's not necessarily a nice experience. It doesn't feel good if you have a hangover. And similar in the Samvega, when one has this sobering experience, it may not feel good in the beginning, but as wholesome, it's beneficial because it gives us an incentive to practice. And then that pain wasn't wasted, that death, that sense of loss is turned about into something positive. So let us all keep in mind that this is what it's ultimately about, and this is what is possible. And sometimes I've noticed, even old-term traditional Buddhists, when they contemplate impermanence, they sometimes seem to take it as a contemplation of resignation. Okay, I can't change it, so I contemplate, and this is not something joyful. It's like kind of I resign myself to the fact that I have to die. This is not what the Buddha meant. We're not resigning ourselves to the fact that we have to die, but we contemplate impermanence in order to completely let go and experience what is beyond death. This is what it's really about. It's not meant to lead us to a state of resignation, of okay, I can't change it, so I just resign myself to it. The very opposite, the Buddha encourages us that we can change it in the fact of our mortality and the fact of all the other pain and suffering we experience a lot in the human life. We don't resign ourselves to it. We practice not to go completely beyond it. And it can be done, and there's many who have witnessed that. There's amazing reports, like in one sutta, I forgot the name of the monk, I think it's one brother of Venerable Sariputta who had ordained, and they were meditating in a large group, and suddenly he announced to the other monks, and he said, please, could you please carry this body outside before it's shattered like a handful of chaff? The body being scattered like a handful of chaff was a simile in ancient India for dying. So basically he said, no, please carry this body outside before I die. And even when the Buddha, his brother, was a bit surprised, and he said, why do you say that? No, I can't notice any change in your faculties. But he just repeated the statement, and they carried him out, and he died. And what had happened is, while meditating, a snake had fallen onto him. And because the snake got startled, poisonous snake, and it fell down through the roof, sometimes only thatched roof and so on, whatever happened there, and the snake fell down on him, got startled and bit him. Now, if we meditate here in the afternoon and someone had a poisonous snake falling onto them and biting them, I'm pretty sure we would all notice, isn't it? There would probably a big scream and a big commotion and so on. But you could see in someone who has reached that state, he remained so quiet, because once he was bitten, what to do anyhow. I didn't have anti-venom so easily available and so on, and he was liberated and released anyhow. He wasn't afraid of dying. And he was so composed that he didn't let out a scream, that he didn't twitch. He got bitten by this poisonous snake, kept sitting, meditating. And people who have experienced that, they report now how painful that is. I heard of one monk who died in Sri Lanka, in Bundalakuti, where I also stayed, by the Russell's viper. Did Palanga? And he made the big mistake of walking in the dark without a light. He stepped on the snake and he got so angry, the snake, and he bit him, and then he came back a second time, bit him a second time. And when he died, and he told one of the people who came to help him, he said, it's like the whole body is burning from inside, like on fire. Very, very painful. But this person, this Arahant, was just sitting there. And the only thing, for some reason, he preferred to die outside. Or maybe, I don't know what is actually the cultural background, maybe it was considered more appropriate or inauspicious. The others may not like it. I don't know why he wanted to die outside. That was the only thing. So once the poisoning process had advanced to the state that he was very close to death, and then he only announced it, and they carried him out. And even at that stage, when he was almost at the point of dying from the snake bite, when the Buddha, his own brother, couldn't notice a change and was surprised. Now this is what is meant by that state. Sickness. One of the attendant monks to Ajahn Chah once reported, and it was a day when Ajahn Chah did his normal routine at the time when he was elderly and famous. And usually after the meal, about 9 o'clock, 9:30, he would start receiving people, and that would usually go until nighttime, at which time he may then still receive monks and talk with the monks and teach the monks. But it was basically all day, from the time after the meal, once he was really famous. And the attendant monk noticed that at the end, when Ajahn Chah went up to his kuti, that he had these massive fever chills. When he lied down, finally he had massive fever chills. And it turned out that Ajahn Chah actually had a bout of malaria that day. And he kept going with that acute bout of malaria, and talking and consoling and encouraging compassionately the people all day until late at night. And again, the people who have malaria, and they usually will also report it's not a nice condition to have, particularly when the fever spell comes, and it's very, very painful and very debilitating. You had malaria? Yeah. And again, this is a quality of people who have mentally moved beyond that. And that is something that is available to all of us if we practice the Dhamma. And you have the guarantee of the Buddha. If you do it properly, you will get to that same state.